Hello and welcome inside a special live edition of the Scores Table. Brian Haenchen and Danny Riego here with you. And Danny, sitting next to me, it's Kyle Sokeland, who agreed to sit in with us for the show today, which is really exciting.
No, it's I think it's great. I can't wait to hear his take on seeing Evansville Central, but always good to see you, Soak.
Of course, I'm running on like 3 hours of sleep in a 3-hour drive this morning, but it's always fun.
I saw your tweet. So this is the first time that you made it up to the Hall of Fame, then, huh?
Yeah, we've had a few Memorial girls have been up here since I've been working at the Courier. I know Washington, South Knox, but always an excuse to not make the drive. But these are my favorite type of gyms, so I count this.
Well, yeah, compare and contrast it because you have probably some of the. Does this make like your Mount Rushmore of Indiana high school gyms? I mean, you probably have at least two down south. I'd love to hear your take on the largest and greatest Indiana field house, I think they call it, or whatever.
I would love to see it not full, but somewhere close to capacity to see what the energy is around here. But yeah, it definitely comparable to a Boonville gym down now in our area. It's the same design. Of course, my favorite is probably the Hatchet House in Washington.
Hatchet House.
And of course, selfishly, B&L Fieldhouse, but that's my bias showing a little bit.
Kyle likes to say if it has a hoop and a hardwood, he's there and he loves it. He's a man with simple tastes and simple pleasures.
I don't know about that. There's some duds out there. Let's just say that.
Name them. we have plenty to get to here today. We have Pike taking out Lawrence Central on what was that, Friday, Danny? That we wanted to talk about. We obviously have the Hall of Fame Classic, a couple games today. Second one a little bit more exciting than the first. I think it's fair to say, and everybody involved would agree. We have some transfer news to discuss. We haven't had a chance to talk about that. All four of the D1 transfers have found homes. Eligibility, I think, for all four, maybe only three of the four, at least the three that I cover, remains in question. And then we have some games tonight to preview here at the Hall of Fame Classic. So let's jump into it, Danny. I will turn the microphone over to you. I've been off, but I was following the Lawrence Central Pike game. Really, really impressive win for the Red Devils, and just another sign that team is ready, and that this is the beginning of what could be a very special run for that team.
Yeah, I think you're seeing. It was one of the biggest statement games, kind of the calendar thus far. But I think you're starting to see an evolution of Pike that makes them different than maybe the team that we saw go up to Homestead for their only loss of the year. You know, when they won the Marion County tournament, the central narrative that we kind of talked about leading up to the championship game was how they made 3-pointers. I think I've said this before, but you guys heard Coach Ramey's comments. They had 6 players that made a 3-pointer in that game, all before the middle of the third quarter. You look at the championship game of Pike, and it was all, middle ball screen, and they got really good looks in switch, and particularly with Savea Mitchell. This game, I think they were really good on the defensive side. Now, yes, it was a 22-22 basketball game between Pike and Lawrence Central on Friday night, and then Pike unfolds for 49 in the second. So now I think what you're starting to see is their defensive prowess coupled with their balance on offense, which makes a lot of people just in casual conversations say I've heard a lot of people kind of casually tell me that they think Pike is the best team in the state. And I think that's directly related to the different ways that they have won big basketball games just in the last week. But in that game, Hank, I think Lola finished with 28 was a huge part of Lola Lampley of Lawrence Central being a huge part of that game, but their ability to make it really hard on the other players, particularly Kiki Butler, who is as gifted of an offensive basketball player as there is anywhere in the state, regardless of class, to make things very difficult on her, I think foreshadows what any team has to face when facing Pike, is they have multiple ways to kind of stop defenders. So, I think their balance on both sides of the floor, I think, is remarkable to this point. And I'm not sure that I completely disagree that they're the team that looks the best right now.
Talent-wise, obviously Lawrence Central is up there in terms of the state's best, but something that that Pike has that Lawrence Central does not is depth. It has a lot of depth. It has depth in spades. It almost has too much depth than what anybody could possibly know what to do with, and yet they're making it work. And all the pieces are fitting together. You can see people settling into their roles on offense. You mentioned the freshmen. The freshmen are figuring out their roles. They're kind of settling in, getting adjusted to the varsity level. It's fascinating talking to Savea Mitchell on the show last week, just the physicality in the jump. She kind of joked and said, I got to get in the weight room. But you can see her advancing along the curve, and the same thing with the other kids and some of the kids that are making the jump up to varsity. But it is such a well-rounded outfit. I think the next step for Pike is just closing out those games, and we kind of saw that against Lawrence Central, and cleaning up some of those offensive miscues that have allowed teams back into the game. We saw it in the third quarter there against Roncalli last Monday in the county championship game, where Pike went into a little bit of a lull offensively, which allowed Roncalli to claw their way back into that game and keep things a little bit more interesting than I think they probably should have been at that point of the season. But that's easily fixed. Like, that's not like an injury. It's not, you need time to learn it thing. That's kind of a thing that you can work out in practice. And I'm really excited for that team. And I think those assessments of them being the best team in the state certainly have a lot of water. And I think that I would love to see them against Homestead in a rematch. I wish that game was played around this time of year, maybe even later in January, just so we could see a more complete Pike product against a more complete and healthy Homestead product.
That's a good point. The first time they played, it was very early in the season. Delaney Knoll wasn't there. I think that was when Keith was really he was running hockey line changes too. I mean, it was like 5 in, 5 out. He settled more into a I would call it a traditional rotation in regards to depth. He comes with Mitchell and Nicholson seemingly in every basketball game. But I think let's just kind of go a little bit further with the depth here. Like, we talked about having depth and developing depth are two different things. I almost think that Coach Lampley kind of almost tipped her cap to the way that Pike is doing it, because she is going deeper into her bench than maybe people had anticipated. And I thought Pike, with where they are in the season right now through the development of that depth, was able to get production. But you kind of referenced like the offensive, inconsistencies maybe that we've seen with Pike early in the season. I think they scored 49 points in the second half against Lawrence Central in that lopsided victory. They were up 1 or down 1 to Jeffersonville just days later, and then they unfold for another, whatever it was, 45, I think, in the second half. Like, they have the offensive firepower to go out and get, plus 45 in a half. And the fact that it was in the second half of both games would lead you to make the conclusion that one of two things is happening, probably both on some level. One, the halftime adjustments that Pike is employing at the half, coupled with the fact that maybe they just wear teams down. Like, maybe the fact that they're just not playing as many players in the first half and not asking them to do so much is almost giving them opportunities to say, hey, listen, we're going to attack you off the bounce in the second half when you've had already 45 possessions in this game, 45, 50 possessions in this game. In the first half of those games, maybe the legs of opponents are just maybe a little bit fresher.
Another game that we want to talk about before we shift over here to the Hall of Fame, Danny, Hamilton Southeastern with a really impressive win over Homestead. Kayla Stidham, KK Holman teamed up to do their thing to take down Homestead. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting it to go that way, a game that HSE seemed like controlled most of the way.
HSE, I thought they were really impressive. I thought they were equally as impressive in that game. And this might be a little bit too far, but maybe equally impressive in that game as Pike was in the Lawrence Central game. HSE is going to, and this is the same narrative that has always been there attached to Satterfield's HSE teams as of late, was they're going to be in every game because they can guard. Like, if you look at the night before the Homestead game, I mean, the Homestead game is, that's a game that they have highlighted. That's a game that they want. That's a game that they want to make a statement. They know a lot of eyes are going to be on that game. But the night before they played Fishers, there was a stretch in a rivalry Mudsock game on a neutral site where I think if my memory serves here, I think they held Fishers scoreless for 9 minutes of gameplay in that game. like they're going to guard. And when you can guard, to hold Homestead to I think it was maybe 53, that is below efficiency metrics in a game that has 65, 70 possessions. Like, to only give up 53 points. So the attachment and the thought track with HSE is, can they score enough? And you talked about Holman and Stidham. Like, I said this to somebody in the gym that day. I don't know that any singular basketball player affects the way that the game is played, like the game flow of the game, possession to possession, more than KK Holman, more than Kennedy Holman. Like, she just puts such stress on the defense in different ways. And I think it's very difficult to keep her in front. I think it's very difficult to contest shots without fouling her. And the same thing that, and this is the one thing that I point out, the same thing that happened last year with Kennedy Holman, we're starting to see this year also. And that is her getting the 3-point shot to be a part of her repertoire. Last year, I think it was that she shot over 40% from the Carmel game on, which was a game played maybe a little bit after Thanksgiving, early December last year. In the last 2 games, Kennedy Holman has 4 made 3-pointers in the last 2 games, and Fishers and Homestead respectively, which actually eclipsed the amounts of threes that she had made previously. So I think we have to erase the percentages and the attempts and the makes and all of the strategy that has been employed on Kennedy Holman to this point from the 3-point line. And if she's going to make threes, I think that's going to be something that's going to age really, really well for HSE moving forward.
I'll shift this over here to the game at the field house just in case the internet goes out, because we also want to get to the transfers. And this is about when we bring on Sokeland normally. The first game of the day, Warsaw Evansville Central, 79-41 Warsaw. It was about as what the score would indicate. It probably could have been a little bit worse if not for a couple missed threes and obviously some players out late. It's a tough spot for Evansville Central. You lose your point guard to a knee injury at the beginning of the season. You have your best player, one of the best in the state, Maddie Shirley, playing through an injury. She's only, 70-80%, I think was the number that their coach put on it. Tough sledding and not real much relief in sight with the way that the schedule lines up the rest of the month.
You're right. I mean, a month ago, this team looked really, really good because they blew the doors off of Gibson Southern in that opener. They beat Washington in overtime in Corden. And then things have just slowly fell apart because Shirley got hurt. It was a foot injury that I won't be 100% basically all year. I think she needs like 6 weeks off of it to truly get back. She's just the type of kid that does not want to miss basketball. So she's good, and she loves the team. She's just going to gut through it. And of course, when Maddie Glazer, who was the point guard, went down, I think a few weeks ago, and it is an ACL injury, it just shifted everybody around to new spots. Some girls are just not ready for that spot or uncomfortable. And then all these opponents just seem to be long and athletic and could turn you over, which is exactly what Warsaw did. I mean, we're looking at the box score. Was it 26 turnovers?
Yep.
And then Warsaw hit 12 threes. So it just one thing after the other. And I think Central's schedule has a bit of a reprieve in the beginning of January. So maybe they can figure things out then. But they've got, I think, North Knox on Friday. So it'll be a very tough game. And then the back half of January is tougher. So Central, they're in a bind right now, but I think they're just trying to gut through it any way they can.
I think a good opportunity for them tonight too. I mean, because that's the one thing about the Hall of Fame is that you're going to get 2 quality games. And so, they're not playing at 8, they're playing at 6, but it's still against a really, really good Plainfield team, which showed a lot of, we'll just call it grit, not to get too far ahead of ourselves. But I think Central, that's a lot to ask Maddie Shirley against Warsaw at the Hall of Fame. It's just a lot. And I think the storyline was there, and I understand the selection and in giving her the stage, and she's certainly earned it. But Warsaw wasn't going to let her go out there and get 35, which is that's what we really wanted to see was, Maddie go out and get 35 single-handedly and carry that into the fourth quarter. That's a really tough ask of that kid.
That's really what I wanted. I just wanted her, Bricker, and Zartman to combine for like 100 points or something.
Yep.
Just light it up. And I mean, it is crazy that just how much the optics on this event kind of shifted over the past couple of weeks because of Evansville Central's injury issues. A Plainfield team that's still growing and figuring things out. Warsaw is a bit of a question mark. I feel a little bit more confident in them, and then Norwell has looked really good. But same with Central. It's tough too. The coach are in a tough spot because their head coach is pretty open, just saying we're trying to see what works. We're just kind of experimenting, and you can tell that it's wearing down. But to Maddie Shirley's credit in particular, one that she's toughing through this, because she has college to look forward to. She could easily sit out and start gearing up for that, but she's not. And two, during the course of the game, you never really see her head drop, shoulders drop. Her body language is very good. And she's a kid that seems to still care and is invested, even as that Warsaw game. I mean, it got out of hand pretty bad pretty early, and nobody would have faulted her if she maybe would have disengaged a little bit, but she stuck with it, hung in there, which I appreciated and I like to see.
Because we don't have the frequency of seeing Evansville Central as much as Soke does, I would like to ask you, Soke, it seemed like Maddie was bringing the ball up. It seemed like she was playing point guard. Obviously, when you lose your point guard, it's all bets are off, right? It's just possession to possession. You're looking to survive. But it also looked like Maddie wasn't getting touches in spots where she can really do some damage because she has to get rid of the basketball early, particularly against that extended trap zone. Is that something that they just patched together, or is this something that they did like previously with Maddie and moving her around and playing point guard? Because that seemed like a really debilitating position switch for them in this game.
Yeah, they did not do this last year. I think there was not rumors, but just talk in the summer of trying to move her around the perimeter. Because I think maybe USI, where she's signed with, wants to see her move around the court a bit more. But then once Glazer went down and just everything had to throw something at the wall, Maddie's definitely one of the better ball handlers at this point. So, yes, I agree that putting her on the perimeter, it just puts her in the wrong spot to get that offense going. Because at least the last few times I've seen them, I'm shocked at whenever she did get a clean post look. And she got 2 or 3 whenever Warsaw switched to the man-to-man. And you still had to fight through a couple of defenders just to get those. But, yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think they were trying it in the summer and trying to see if they would do that. Then it's a necessity right now. I mean, they're just really young at the guard spot, and maybe this was last year. They definitely would have been more competitive in this game. Maybe in a couple of years if these players were more ready.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough spot. On the other side, Danny, I was texting you. I was impressed by Warsaw, but you got to be careful not to read too much into it because they had a significant advantage. I think we'll learn significantly more tonight when they play Norwell. But watching Warsaw, the girls talked about how it was a return to form defensively for them and just how the intensity's ratcheted up since that loss to Jennings County. I noticed it offensively where they looked a lot more cohesive. They were passing the ball. The passes were crisp. They're on point. Again, the opponent aside, it looked and felt more like the Warsaw of last year. And in talking to the girls, too, you kind of get the sense that loss to Jennings County may have been the best thing that could have happened to this team because it kind of woke them up and got them refocused on the task at hand.
No, I think that's a smart comment. One of the things that we talked about with Warsaw was, kind of their third offensive looks that they were getting from Reagan Huss. And while that complements Reagan Huss, it also kind of highlighted that they needed maybe an Alexis Neely to step into maybe the form that she had last year. I think in watching them play the last couple of weeks, granted, not against Norwell level or Evansville Central even level teams, Neely does look a lot more comfortable on the offensive side. And I do think that that's something that we need to watch tonight. I thought this is a confident kid. I mean, there's a play, and I don't know when it was. It was when Warsaw was going left, where I think Brooke Zartman had three made threes to this point in the game. And I think Bricker got the ball into the paint, kicked it out, and there was a very clear extra that Neely could have thrown to Zartman for a wide open 3, which would have been, she would have made it, okay, or at least a 49% chance of making it. But Neely shot it because it was a really good look. She was right in rhythm, her shoulder square, and she drilled it. And I think if you have that Alexis Neely and you can return Reagan Huss to the form that she came out with, I think you're starting to see, I don't want to say a more balanced attack because this is anything but balanced, but I do think that you're starting to see Neely make plays on the offensive side and scoring the ball that are going to be building blocks toward what Warsaw is really trying to do, which is get Bricker in downhill attacks, get her feet in the paint, and then they're going to run all of that action for Zartman, who looks great also.
She's going to have a lot of opportunities too, because defenses are so focused on Bricker and Zartman that it opens up a lot of floor for Neely. And that's what I talked about. What I'm going to write about, I think, as part of this event is just what you mentioned, just the way that Alexis kind of evolved into that role and really shined and taken it on as her own, and really really stepped in as a quality, dependable third scorer. And the girls talked about too, just a lot of how much she does the little things that don't show up in the box score, maybe go unnoticed, but they take notice of it during practice, during games, a lot of the things that add up to a winning product on the floor. Spinning this ahead to what we'll see tonight, Danny, Warsaw versus Norwell. We'll talk about their game against Plainfield in a second, but bridging the gap, that's going to be a fascinating game because I think Warsaw matches up well against Norwell's zone to the point that Norwell had to get out of it when they played during the regular season. And I'm really curious to see how much Eric Thornton, how much he alters things, what kind of things he experiments and tries with against Warsaw and vice versa. Because I think Warsaw, I mentioned this, Kyle, I kind of thought that maybe they were experimenting a little bit during that Evansville Central game with the man-to-man defense, with some of the press that they were throwing at them, just to see what works, what doesn't, how it looks, how the girls feeling it, that sort of thing. So I wonder how much of that we'll see tonight, knowing that this could be the first or the second of three potential meetings between these two sides.
I agree that it's not an important game outside of the fact that the winner just wins the Hall of Fame, right? We could see this game in maybe the semi-state championship. Norwell has to get past Homestead and sectionals for us to even have the opportunity for the draw to give us the third matchup. But this second matchup, in just looking at this game, I thought there were some clues. I'll give people something to watch tonight. One of the things that Evansville Central did in this game was they played kind of a version of a 1-3-1 or an odd front zone at times that might have some of the same zone principles that a 1-3-1 or Eric Thornton might employ. And one of the things that Warsaw was doing in this morning game was they were setting flare screens on the wing defenders for Zartman to get into the corner. If you guys remember, Zartman's first couple of threes were off of flares in the corner. One way to circumvent that is to drop your wings. Norwell didn't drop their wings against Plainfield. They kept them high and they kept them in the passing lanes to try to create a little bit of pressure. If Zartman is able to get into the corners to naturally drop those zones, that's going to put Rossworm in the middle of the floor with the responsibility of keeping Jocelyn Bricker out of the paint. Remember, I had mentioned one of the things that Warsaw tries to do every single possession down the floor is try to get Jocelyn Bricker in the paint with the basketball. And that happens most of the time off the bounce. If you have to drop those wings in the 1-3-1 because you're concerned about Brooke Zartman catching and releasing threes, those gaps in the middle of the floor are going to be super wide. So I would encourage everybody to watch. What I'm going to watch is how does Norwell position their wings and what kind of gaps is Jocelyn able to create in attacking Rossworm off the bounce, and how much does Warsaw kind of back screen those wings, and how do they circumvent that action that Warsaw quite honestly showed more than a half dozen times in the morning game. So I think it's really interesting because we could see, what you said, Hank, which is maybe coaches like Aaron Thornton and Lenny Krebs just trying some different things in their second matchup with the idea that they're just logging experience that's going to be relevant when it really, really matters in the state tournament.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Norwell, by the way, coming off 25 turnovers against Plainfield, which was a season worst for them. Something maybe to keep an eye on with that Warsaw defense, the way that it's ramping up. Speaking of that game against Plainfield, it was also not the prettiest, but it was a little bit dramatic there down the stretch. Yeah. And talking to Kurt Benj after the game, toughness was the word that he keeps coming back to. They have to be tougher, and that's defensively, offensively. They have to know their assignments. They can't take as many plays off. Something that stood out, especially in the first half, is they shot 20%. They're missing some shots around the rim that they make most nights, or they should make most nights. Plainfield was. And that really crippled them. And that crippled them when they were trying to come back there in the second half, too. They had a point where they got it, I think, within 1 or 2 points They had a shot in the lane that wouldn't go. They had a shot. It felt like a really rushed three. I didn't quite understand the shot selection there. It wasn't the best shot selection, which happens, but they make those 2 mistakes back to back. Addie Norris goes down to the other end and bangs a three. And it was about 2 minutes left, but that was kind of like, it felt like a little bit of a backbreaker where Plainfield had a fight so hard to get back into that thing just to not be able to break through there. It really was damning. Again, it's just the common thread here is Plainfield's coming up really. They've come close to challenging some of these big teams, but just can't quite get over that hump. And I don't know. It was interesting. I was encouraged with what I saw defensively, but that's kind of what we knew. Offensively, it's curious to see how this team develops over the next couple of weeks.
I agree. I think Plainfield and their coaching staff and their players and that entire organization, I think deserves a lot of credit. That's a 13-point deficit to the defending state champs, and what I think the coaches have is the number one team in the state right now. That's a very easy opportunity to just fold in that game. But there were some adjustments that were made on the defensive side that I think really kept them in the game. If you watch the first quarter of that game, Norwell got a lot of threes. Rakestraw talked about it on the sound. You guys didn't have the sound, but I did. I had the luxury of it, and he had pointed out very eloquently and very accurately that of Norwell's first 16 shot attempts, 13 of them were three-pointers. That isn't what we saw in the state championship game against Greensburg, where Greensburg, remember Jason Simpson, we've talked about this, stayed home. Plainfield made the dedicated decision that they were going to help and they were going to live with the fact that Norwell was going to make threes. They made enough threes in the early stages of that game to give them a 13-point lead. But in the second half, Plainfield not only stayed home, but they denied that kind of taillight slide. So in dribble drive, there's somebody that fills behind the person. It's getting in their taillights. There's a lot of offensive coaches that will talk about getting in the taillights. Plainfield really, really, really denied that. And that was a schematic difference in the first half and the second half. And I think that really bothered them. They were able to get stops against Norwell by the change in the adjustment. But their inability to score, I mean, not to be overly basic here, their inability to score the basketball just really, I think, was the difference in the game. I think to bring it full circle to your original point, Hank, like they need to find more consistency. And I will say this too, like maybe I should say this, maybe I shouldn't say this. I'm going to say it and just get off of it real quick. But I don't, Menser is like, she's limping. She is limping, man. Like she is walking around the floor with a distinct limp. And so now she has to rely on, people to create her volume as much. Even her best move of the day, which was a closeout three, one dribble on the baseline side, 15-footer in the second half that I think made it a 2-possession game. That's a very simple thing. And it probably really hurt. Like she doesn't look healthy, but their inability, I think, to have kids that can create for Menser and to have offensive consistency throughout an entire 32-minute game, I think is maybe what we saw that unraveled them today.
I asked about Menser. I don't want to misquote anything, but it's more or less just a pain tolerance thing for her at this point. It's similar to Maddie Shirley. She's playing through it. Bless her for gutting it through. But yeah, she's clearly not at 100%. And I'll have more about that on the Star here probably tomorrow morning with the wrap for the event. But that hurts. Mariah Armstrong made some good plays for them. The Covenant Christian transfer. She was 4 or 5 from the field. Her name kept popping up there, especially late in the game, 8 points. That helps. Berkeley Williams, I feel like once Berkeley kind of rediscovers her shot and settles in offensively, I think that might be kind of the thing that turns the key for this team and kind of gets them around that corner and over this hill. Because, I mean, the way that she defends is tremendous, but once you add her as a scorer and get her scoring the ball a little more consistently, that opens things up a lot. Abrielle Dugan is steady. She had an off night tonight, but that kid's pretty steady, just same with Riley Todd and Caroline Pugh. Like, they're good within the roles. And once they can get Berkeley up to water to where she normally shoots the ball, I think they'll be okay. But Menser being hurt certainly changes the dynamics a little bit or significantly for that team. But yeah, I'm interested to see how they look against Central.
Berkeley's asked to do so much. I mean, she drew the Rossworm assignment. I mean, that's a very difficult assignment. We talk about how she gives up inches, with anybody that she guards. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see quite honestly, Berkeley matched up against Maddie Shirley, where she's giving up inches again, and there's some familiarity with those two kids and playing some a kind of off-season stuff together and things like that. You mentioned Abrielle Dugan. I didn't know that she had an off night, but she approached the game as a 39% 3-point shooter. And if you look back at some of the early wins that they had, it wasn't even the early wins. Like some of the early games, I think in the Brownsburg game, it was her that made a couple of really big threes. She had a big three in the second half of this game that helped close it. But when you have a 39% 3-point shooter, I think Abrielle Dugan is one of those kids that if she can establish herself as more of an offensive threat consistently possession to possession, I think that's one of those things that can help this basketball team kind of moving forward, because that kid's gotten a ton better. And not only does she have the ability to score it, but she has the ability to score it in big spots. This is now the second time where we've seen her hit a big shot in a big game in a big spot. And that is a kid that maybe in the absence, if you're asking Berkeley to do so much on both ends of the floor, that can step up and help Menser provide some offensive production for Plainfield as they spin forward.
5 steals, 5 assists for Briley Todd. She was very impactful on the defensive end. Berkeley Williams only credited with 2 steals, but I'd love to know the deflections count, because it seemed like she had her hands, was creating a lot of chaos there defensively as Plainfield started to get their way back into that thing again with that defensive pressure that they're kind of known for. Any other closing thoughts, Danny, on those games or anything like that before we jump over to some of the transfers news?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should talk about Norwell. This is the number 1 team in the state, according to the coaches right now. They do have their only loss right now is on the road at the Tiger Den, which so from a strength of loss perspective, I mean, this is as good of a basketball team as we have. This is the potential matchup that we have between Norwell and Homestead. So to talk a little bit about them, I did jot a couple of notes down in my head. The first is Jada Dale. When it's 32-25, Rossworm picks up her 4th foul. By the way, the 3rd foul was a charge drawn by Berkeley Williams. But a couple of possessions later, Rossworm picks up her 4th foul. That's supposed to tighten the basketball game up. Addison Norris comes into the game, gets a bucket that ignites a 6-0 run, and they actually extend the lead while Rossworm is on the bench with her 4th foul. I think that was critical, but I mentioned Jada Dale. Jada Dale came in and played the point of the zone where Rossworm normally plays and sets the tone behind her. While Jada Dale was playing the point of the zone, Norwell turned Plainfield over 3 times. They picked him once on a pass. They created an over and back call, which Kurt went ballistic. Didn't think that it was. He obviously has a better view than me. I don't know, but it was called a turnover for their second one. And then they pitched one on a ball reversal out of bounds. They got 3 turnovers in order to extend runs from 4-0. They only extended this one to 6-0, but that 6-0 run with, kind of toward the end of the third quarter, I think was the critical stretch. And I think one of the reasons why it swung in Norwell's favor was because Jada Dale came in. 1 closing point on her. This is not a surprise to anybody at Norwell. At least it shouldn't be. This kid came into the state championship game against Brownsburg and made really big plays. Remember, Brownsburg stayed home. Jada Dale, I remember, had that 2-foot dance in the paint where she went 1v1 and got a basket. But I think we're starting to see the depth. Like, this is more than Rossworm. This is more than Norris. Saul Frank had an off night. This is more than Saul Frank. We started to see the other players for Norwell that have the state championship pedigree and the state championship experience step up in a game like this and really make big plays. Jada Dale was the kid that really jumped out at me. So I'll use that to kind of punctuate the talk on the morning session. Interesting, kind of night sessions, and I'll let you guys kind of talk about the transfers.
Yeah, a lot of transfer news here over the past week. It all is happening just insanely fast. You have Riley Shellhammer going to Greenfield Central. Her eligibility is unknown. You have Riley Kanan going to South Spencer in a curveball that few, if any, maybe saw coming. And you have the Morelli sisters going to Noblesville. Soak's been sitting here on the sideline, so I'll just let him start with Riley Kanan going to South Spencer. Interesting to say the least.
Yeah, excuse me. Again, I didn't really know what she was going to do, to be honest, because her dad mentioned to me there's a couple of prep schools that were very interested. but they were also talking local schools and weighing their options. The only connection I could make personally, excuse me.
Looks like we lost the audio. Go ahead and give me guys a thumbs up if you guys can hear me. There we go. We're back now. We're back. So the last thing that we heard you say was like the first two words of the paragraph that you're talking about, Riley Haenchen. So just start that one over again.
Yeah, basically Riley Haenchen has transferred from Evansville Memorial to South Spencer, which is a couple counties over, down by the river, down by the Ohio River. It was a surprise to a lot of people just because she had prep school options. They were discussing other local schools just to see what was their best fit for her, both as a player probably, but also as a student and mentally. I haven't talked to the family yet as for why it's South Spencer. Probably planning to do that here closer to when she's eligible, which as of my knowledge would be 30 days. And she enrolled at South Spencer on December 17th. So come back a couple weeks before the tournament starts. Again, excuse me. It is a curveball, like Hank said. It just, other than that, I don't know. It is what it is. I mean, the family made the decision and has now made their choice.
How does she fit in with that team? So have you had a chance or?
I have not yet seen South Spencer this season. I know a couple of years ago they won a sectional and took Brownstown to the overtime in the regional. I know they have a very good guard in Alexis Harris, who's averaging about 20 points, and a few other players around her. I don't know if they have a big, and this would seem to fill that spot. And, of course, Keenan is a capable shooter, so she probably would fit well in that system. I would like to see them play for more judgment. And I think they have a game on January 17th and the 20th, which is probably around the time which she would be eligible. I might make a trip over there. But it's also a 2A school, so maybe this is a big shot in the arm for them because I think they're in the same sectional as Mater Dei, who's having a solid year, and North Posey, who's a athletic defensive team. So maybe we'll be talking about South Spencer here in the first week of February.
On the other side, or on the little bit closer to home, you have Riley Shellhammer enrolling at Greenfield Central after starting her career at Fishers, then went to Lawrence Central, now Greenfield Central. Unclear on her eligibility moving forward. I talked with her athletic director last week when the news broke, but the school planned to begin the transfer process. There's also options for hardship waivers and all that. So we'll see how that unfolds. I don't want to speculate on that. And on the other side, the Morelli sisters, they're enrolled at Noblesville officially. I'm trying to find out what their eligibility status is. The school just effectively declined comment or not answered questions about what their eligibility will be for the rest of the season. But based on the IHSAA rules, Briley Morelli, the younger one, since this is her first transfer, should have to sit out the requisite 30 days. Then the older sister, Gianna, since it's her second, should have to sit out a full year, same as Riley Shellhammer, 365 days from the date of enrollment.
Basis on or other examples of this ever happening. So I get it. At the same time, I'm not the parent. I don't know. People may have different reasons for moving schools. I know that at least around Evansville, it was a big story about Riley Haenchen moving and why. And his father, of course, you can read the story in his statement as to why on courierpress.com. Other than that, again, like you said, it's a lot of gray area. So for me, I told people before the school year started that I just wanted to see how it played out. Is this going to happen more often? How often? Or is it just going to be a thing? Or is it not going to happen as much? Like this, 4 of these in a row, kind of like within 2 weeks of each other.
Yeah,
it's a shot. Like it's all happening at once. So I understand why people jump to, like you just did, they shouldn't be eligible. I'm still on the fence. Let's see how it plays out and how often it happens, and let's see what the IHSAA rules on these players right now, because I know Keenan is supposed to be 30 days, and there was others. Maybe those at least in your area do have to sit out a year, and if that's the case, that's what they did beforehand.
I think okay. If you're on team, let them play. Okay, I think the first thing that you have to say is there's individual circumstances maybe that we aren't privy to. Okay, so let's establish that's in our business to talk about it. You guys have both alluded to that. I will reinforce that point. Okay, but the consistency that I've kind of had through this is this: we live in I don't know, an adapt or die world, right? I mean, we're starting to see it at all levels of sport. I mean, like, I think adapt or die, like Soke, like I'm quoting Kurt Signetti when I say that, like it like literally is adapt or die. So I do think that this is something that is going to happen multiple times throughout the year. I think what's interesting is the decisions that are being made with Kanan, Morelli, and Shellhammer respectively, I think are creating precedent, not for the IHSAA, you know, in the last 10 years, but I think the IHSAA in the next 10 minutes, right? If these kids do get immediate eligibility, what Hank is trying to say is, I think now you really blur the lines as to what is an acceptable transfer and what is not an acceptable transfer. Okay. But if you are on team, let them play, like that piece of it, I think those people would use the same arguments that they are seeing in maybe other sports that is making it maybe more socially acceptable for, you know, midseason transfers. If the rules, the way they are, allow somebody to leave and sit out the 30 days, again, I just think that this is something that we are going to see more and more with some of the better players. I made the comment, you know, a couple episodes ago, maybe even the last episode, that I think one of the dying things that you'll see is like Center Grove had one in football, New Pal had one in football. There's like, you have these classes that have been together since they were in like second grade, and they come all the way up, and then they get into high school and all that. I just think that every 7th and 8th grade family that has a good girls basketball player now, as a part of their transition into high school, part of that is going to be, let's sit down and let's talk about where the best place for her to spend, maybe not the next 4 years of their high school career, maybe just the next year. I just think that there's a side to this from a mobility perspective, I think, that is very interesting that the rules have allowed. I have also connected this to NIL in the payments of high school players. Like, I mean, we're headed down a path right now where, I mean, we're going to have NIL for high school kids before we have a shot clock in Indiana high school. If anybody wants to bet me on that, go ahead, because we're going to. And I think that is really going to further blur the lines even more so. I'll close with this, and I didn't really say anything in that, but I'll close with this. I went out to dinner with friends, non-girls basketball related. We had no reason to talk about anything related to girls basketball. We were the last people to get to dinner. We sit down, and the first thing that somebody said was, "Where do you stand on the transfer thing?" This is a huge story that is far-reaching, and Hank, you bring it up on the show probably because it's getting clicks with the IndyStar. Like, you're selling subscriptions for people to read those articles because people are genuinely interested outside the girls basketball world about what the IHSAA is going to do with these transfers. So I am maybe less interested in who is transferring and why they're transferring. I am more interested in what happens the next 2 weeks to see how the IHSAA deals with the eligibility of these transfers, because I think that is going to be the telling thing. I think people are focused on who those three families are and who the players are and all of that, and we're trying to figure out what the circumstances are for the transfer, and people are saying very irresponsible things without the knowledge. For me, it's how does the IHSAA deal with it, and what do they do?
It feels like a watershed moment almost. Like you said, Danny.
It's absolutely right.
Let's get a term and a lot going forward. And I have no problem with transferring it.
Yeah,
it is what it is. You do what's best for your kid. I don't think any of the three of us do, to be clear. It's just the idea. I think that there's a difference, though, between off-season transferring and in-season transferring. And when you allow it to happen in-season with sitting out a month, you open the door potentially for rental players or for a kid, because then you can also go back to your original school a year later. So if you're having an unexpectedly bad year, you leave, you come back, no harm, no foul. You miss a month, but then you get to play the most important games of the year, then you go back to your original school. So there's a lot of gray area there that allows for shenanigans to happen. And I think now we're finally starting to see that kind of come to light, and we're gonna get to a point where it's gonna have to be addressed one way or the other, and it's gonna be fascinating to see where it goes. But transfer overall, fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, and so let me give you the other side to that. Everything that you said is absolutely right and absolutely accurate and compelling. Okay, but this is also compelling, is because I've been drawing the analogy to sports at different levels. We see rentals every single year in professional sports. Like, somebody will rent somebody on the final year of their contract. They'll let them go and hit free agency after the year to help them win a championship. Now, one might say, Danny, that's professional sports. Okay. But I guess that's the point I'm trying to make, is I'm not saying that a high school student athlete is a professional, but we saw the line change in college. These student athletes at the collegiate level turned into paid employees of the university or of a board, like a Hoosiers Connect or an all at Indiana University, or an all good dogs at Butler or whatever. They almost are like employees, right? If NIL does come into play in the next few years, coupled with open enrollment and the IHSAA transfer capability that they have put out with their own rules, then they can be treated as if they are essentially paid employees, if you will. If NIL, now I'm way down the road, there's that's not the case with these three transfers, but I do think that this is something that I think is just going to be more normalized, and I think from a basketball fan perspective, I want to break down Noblesville with the Morellis. Because the Morelli sisters change Noblesville. They change their outlook and their ability to win Sectional 8. They change them schematically with what Gianna Morelli can do in when coupled with Cece Quigley. Briley Morelli is one of the best shooters in the class, like hands down. So her ability now to stretch a defense from the 3-point line, with the emergence of kids like Maya Blower and Hutchinson and things like that. And you're starting to see kids on their roster now play better, whether it be a Nora Veter, whether it be an Aaliyah McGee at Noblesville. So I just once the decision happens, I am very anxious to be able to break it down if they do in fact get eligibility this year, because I think it changes things. This is not just 4 random kids. I mean, these are 4 Division I recruits that absolutely could change the outcome of who is a sectional champ and maybe even who a state champ is.
It's going to be really exciting. It's massive for Noblesville, especially. I mean, even if it's just Briley Morelli who's eligible. I mean, that's a big addition for them. She was the second leading scorer, I think it was, on Chittard, first or second scorer. So that's a big addition for them, and just another piece that they need to kind of bring together that young group potentially. So that'll be exciting to see. And then Canaan too at South Spencer will be interesting as well. Any closing thoughts for you boys before I find a way to blow myself up again? Kyle, anything you want to say more controversial? If you want to overshadow anything that was said, that'd be great.
I thought my Hatchet House take at the beginning of this was going to be the hot take, but whatever.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Danny, anything else from you before we get out of here and call it a holiday?
No, Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy holidays, whatever holiday you celebrate in your home.
Good stuff. Well, Kyle and I both have full coverage from the Hall of Fame Classic tonight. Danny and I'll be back with another podcast sometime after Christmas, before the new year. I'm going to be up at Wings and Rings here in a couple weeks, and I'm going to check out Center Grove's tournament as well, I think the following night. So we'll have coverage all over the place on both Kyle and my sites and on our Twitter feeds. We thank you all so much for watching. Have a great holiday, and we'll talk to you again soon.